Welcome to the Daily Tanya. Today is Tuesday, the 90th day of Elul, and the additional chapters in Tehillim today is 45, 46, 47. Again, you have the link in the description to say the extra chapters of Psalms. And let's begin with Tzedakah. Gedoyle Tzedakah shemekareves es hageula. Tzedakah brings Mashiach closer. So we are holding middle of chapter 15 in Igeret HaKodesh, and today's class is actually a very fundamental class in Hasidus to understand the concept of the attributes, the emotive attributes. And Alter Rebbe started this letter, this essay, by explaining, first of all, how can we understand God's attributes? And he said, because God created us basically in his image. And therefore, no matter how low a person is still connected with the highest levels, and the levels of his neshama is connected to the top. But in the same time, the Alter Rebbe gave us another introduction saying that we shouldn't think that in any way our emotive attributes is similar to God's emotive attributes. Yes, in essence they're connected, but at a totally different level in a different realm. And we have no clue and no idea to understand really God's attributes. So after these two introductions, Alter Rebbe goes on to the main part of this essay to explain, to understand what are the emotive attributes. What are the spheres, the 10 spheres? We have the intellectual attributes, the emotive attributes. So he begins by explaining what is chesed, what is gvura, and what is tiferes. Chesed is the attributes of expansion, giving. Gevura is the attribute of restriction, judgment. And tiferes is sort of a combination of both. Tiferes is more of compassion. So the attribute of chesed, really, when we're talking about emotive attributes, emotions that a person experiences, every emotion really contains within it many different emotions. And there's many, many details of what emotion you experience. For example, when you love someone, is it just love, just pure love, or is there other emotions there also involved? It can be emotions like fear, it can be emotions like jealousy, emotions of being persistent, you want to be victorious, you want to win someone over, you want to prove to something to someone. There's many, many different emotions that can be involved in every emotion. But in general, there are these seven emotions that we're going to explain. These are the basic 7 emotions that from this, all other emotions derive a combination of many different types of emotions. So he's going to explain there's the emotive attributes that is within the person. To give, not to give. There is also the emotive attributes that comes after the person already has a certain emotion. Let's say you have an emotive attribute, you want to teach your son playing piano. But then this is a decision you made, you want to do it, you really want to do it, but when it comes to actually doing it, there may be other obstacles. There comes in the other emotions of netzach and hod, which is those parts of you which pushes you to go on in action to do it. And then there is the actual doing it, is Yesod and Malchus. So we're going to explain it as we go along. This lesson really, in the brief lesson that we're going to teach today, it's really hard to have a comprehensive understanding of the whole thing, but we get a glimpse of what those sfirot, the attributes, what they mean. And by knowing them, first of all, we can know ourselves. We know what are our motive attributes, how we are, and how we can use them to connect to Hashem. That's going to be the continuation of this essay. So let's see inside, as the Alter Rebbe continues, Siman Tezvav, letter 15. Continues the Alter Rebbe and says as follows: V'hine, Klolus hayud sfiris shebenishmas ha'adam noida lakoyel shamidis nachlokas b'derech klal hayud midis. As regards to the totality of the 10 spheres, the 10 attributes, as they appear in the soul of man, it is known to all that emotive attributes divide into 7 general categories. So seven general categories make up the emotive attributes. V'chol protei hamidus sheba'adam bois me'achas mezayin midus elul. Each of the particular attributes in man derives from one of these 7 attributes. Shehein shoirish kol hamidus uchlalusam, for they are the root of all the attributes and their generality. And it begins with the attribute of chesed, the attribute of love and kindness, the attribute of giving, being benevolent, just wanting to give. Namely, the attribute of chesed, the loving kindness, which is a thrust to diffuse benevolence to all without limit. That's chesed. Chesed is the attribute of one who wants to just give, not judging whether the person deserves it or he doesn't deserve it, whether he needs it or he doesn't need it. He just has this attribute of giving. Then there is the other attribute that counters it. This is the gvura. Gvura comes to limit the giving to those who deserve. Midas hagvura letzamtzem le'ashpia kol kachoy shelo le'ashpia kol ikar klal. The attribute of gvura is stern limitation and contraction, which seeks to restrain such a degree of diffusion or to withhold diffusion altogether from certain individuals. So these are the 2 main emotive attributes: the chesed, the desire to give, and the attribute of limitations. And then there is the third, which is kind of a combination of both, which is really something which is higher than both of them. And that is called midas rachamim. Midas rachamim, the attribute of rachamim. Rachamim means compassion. Lerachim al mi sheshayech loshen rachmanas olav, which seeks to pity a person to whom compassion is appropriate, and to extend benevolence to him as well, although he may be unworthy of it. So that is the difference between chesed, gvura, and rachamim. Chesed is to give to everyone, regardless of need. Gevura is to be judgmental, to be limited to those who deserve. And rachamim is to give even to those who don't deserve, but if they are in need, to give to those who need. So rachamim is a feeling that one can have to someone that you cannot even have a personal connection of feeling of love. For example, if you see a stray cat sometimes. I had the other day a stray cat was stuck in the fence in the backyard by us. And I felt so much rachmanis. Did I have a feeling of love to the cat? No. Some people may develop many feelings towards animals that they have, but a stray cat, you don't have a feeling of love. But I see the cat stuck in the fence, and I had rachmanis and the pain, so I called 911, and the police came and helped me to rescue this cat. So this was Rachmanis is something that anything that you can have, Rachmanis, you can have pity, and that comes from a deep source, which is higher than Chesed and Gvura together. But it combines within it both. It has the Chesed attribute, and there's the giving, and there's also the limitations, are limited to those who need it. Rachamim is the mediating attribute between Gevura and Chesed. Chesed is to give to everyone. The latter of which is mentioned over here, Chesed, would diffuse benevolence to all, even to a person to whom compassion is not at all appropriate. Inasmuch as he lacks nothing and is in no state of trouble whatsoever. Like the example of Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu, he was the embodiment of chesed, giving. He always wanted to give. When he had the circumcision and God took out the son to make it a very hot day so people wouldn't bother him, that he shouldn't have to attend to people, he felt bad that he couldn't give. So Hashem brought the three angels in form of man, and he acted kindly towards them, and he fed them. Did they need the food? No, they didn't need. They were angels. But this was for Avram. From him, he embodied the chesed, and he needed to give to anybody. That is chesed. That is the attribute of chesed. But Tiferes is an intermediary that between the chesed and gvura. Now, because the attribute of rachamim is the mediating attribute, that's why it is called Tiferes. Tiferes means beauty. Why? Because beauty is something that has a harmony of different components. That's what makes beauty. It says, take for example, clothing, a piece of clothing. A piece of clothing, if you have a clothing which is just one color, may be elegant, but it doesn't have the beauty in it. The beauty is something, if you have just something, one color is not beautiful. I mean, if you have, sometimes, yes, you do have a dress which is one color, but it contrasts with the skin color or with the other things that you have, and that brings out the beauty. But just plain one color, you take the canvas and paint it all yellow, it's not going to be beautiful. Unless you call it modern art and you decide it's beautiful. But that's another story. But the point here that the Rebbe says, why is it called beauty? Beauty means a combination of different opposites that come together. Same thing is with music. Music, you have different notes playing. So you have different types of musical instruments that play together in a way that is harmony. It becomes beautiful. Sometimes two things opposite to come, they can clash, and they're not beautiful. But when they come in a way of in a harmonious way, then it becomes beautiful. By analogy, with beautiful garments, which are dyed by many colors, blended in a way that gives rise to beauty and decoration. The garments dyed in one color, however, one cannot apply the term Tiferes, which implies the beauty of harmony. And since the attribute of Rachamim is compounded of Chesed and Gevura, the term Tiferes is appropriate. And then afterwards, once the attribute of either Chesed, Gevura, or Tiferes is aroused to dispense benevolence, as the diffusion is realized, then That is, at the time of the actual diffusion, and a person already that said, okay, I know I want to do it. Came to a conclusion that's the right thing to do. Now, okay, now put your hands in your pocket and take it out and give what you need to give. Then it's already, you need another fight within yourself. It is necessary to deliberate how to diffuse in such a way that the recipient will be able to absorb the diffusion. And Alter Rebbe gives an example. When you want to teach a child something deep, a deep concept, if you're going to tell your child just everything you know, he's going to get nothing. He's going to get confused. You need to break it down to the level, to the point that the child can take it. So this is after a person already decided, he needs to have the further deliberate between himself how to actually do what you want to do. That's what it says. For example, when one wishes, and this is a powerful desire, to convey and teach an intellectual subject to his son. If he will tell it to him in its totality, just as it appears in his own mind, the son will be unable to understand and to absorb it. Rather, one needs to arrange it for him in a different order and context, such as by providing an example from an alternative context. Every word fitly spoken, presenting first one side of the issue at hand and then the other. We're going to tell them about a subject, you're going to tell them all the sides of the issues at the same time. Maybe in your head it makes sense, but the child is going to be confused. You have to take step by step, me'at, little by little, a little of the concept at a time. So this is where the attribute of Netzach and Hod come into the picture. Netzach and Hod are the attributes which you deliberate how to actually deliver what you want to deliver. The deliberation regarding how best to present the concept is referred to by the terms Netzach and Hod. These attributes are the kidneys that advise, in a manner similar to their physical counterpart. Alter Rebbe goes on to say also that this concept we also have in the biological level, that you have when you have the relationship between husband and wife, when you have the semen that comes from the brain. The semen that comes from the brain, it is more of a spiritual thing. It's a very abstract thing in relation to the actual semen that comes and brings and connects and creates a child. And then, so the process goes through connecting, taking this subtle, abstract element that comes from the brain and goes through the process and goes through ultimately to it comes to the two testicles that prepare the sperm. He says v'gam trin bein mavashli mazeh, and they are also in spiritual terms the two testicles that prepare the spermatoza. So, like the physical counterpart, the attribute of Netzach and all that adapt the fusion of a concept. So we're taking something more delicate, more subtle, making into something more material, and the same thing is with the idea. Sometimes you're taking the idea, the concept, a very delicate concept, and you bring it down to with examples that make it more coarse, so the child can understand. Sheyatipa Animsheches Mamoyach. This is the drop issues from the brain. Hainu Dvar Chochma v'Seichel Nimshach Meseichel Av Shelo Yumshach K'mo Yishu Seichel Dak Me'oid V'Moicha V'Sichloi. That is, that they adopt an intellectual subject deriving from the Father's mind in such a way that it will not issue unmodified, meaning as a very subtle concept in his brain and intellect. It has to go down more to become more coarse, something that the child should be able to receive. That it changed somewhat from the subtlety of his intelligence and becomes somewhat less subtle concept, so that the son will be able to absorb it in his mind and understanding. And that process, says the Alter Rebbe, is very similar to the process of the physical drop that comes from the brain and becomes more coarse through the testicle. This is truly analogous to the seminal drop which descends from the brain. It is extremely tenuous, and through the kidneys and the two testicles it becomes truly concrete and corporal. So this is the idea of Netzach and Hod, the process of delivering. When it comes to deliver something from within you, you need to make it something that the recipient is able to receive. And Alter Rebbe brings another example why Netzach and Hod, these two attributes, are called that way. They're called the mills, the grinders, the millstones that prepare the manna for tzaddikim. Just like millstones, you're taking two stones from the two sides and they grind it into pieces, so the recipient, whoever has to consume it, is able to take it. The same thing, the Netzach and Hod are considered as the millstones. Netzach and Hod are also referred to as the grinders and millstones because they grind the manna for the righteous, like the heaven, which is named Shechakim, for it grinds Shechakim, the manna for the righteous. Just as by way of example, a person who grinds wheat with milestones crumbles it into very fine parts so the child can have it. So too does the father need to taper the insight or the intellectual subject he wishes to convey to his son. He has to divide them into many parts, relating them to him gradually with devices and discernment. Do it in a proper way. That's one aspect of Netzach and Hod. Another aspect of this attribute, Netzach, says the Alter Rebbe, is also, Netzach means to be victorious. But sometimes, when a person already made a decision, you made a New Year resolution, you want to do something good, you want to lose weight. But then when it comes, sometimes, you have to go wake up early to go exercise there. You're not so excited to do it. This is when the attribute of Netzach comes. Netzach is when you have the drive to push anything that tries to resist. You're going to stand by. You're not going to let it stop you. That is also the attribute of Netzach. So to be able to carry out the actual decision that you have, that you wanted, in theory, you want to push it, that nothing should stop you from doing it. That's what he says. וגם בכלל, בחינת הנצח ולנצח ולעמוד נגד כל מניע ההשפעה והלימוד בנוי מבית ומחוץ. The category of Netzach also comprises prevailing and standing up against anything, from within or from without, that withholds from his son the transmission of beneficial influence or learning. And he says, Mibais, what does it mean from within? From within means firmly resisting the attribute of Gevura and Tzimtzum, the limitations, within the Father himself. Where it arouses within his will contentions against his son, arguing that he is not yet fit for this profound knowledge. And now follows a parenthetical note in the text, which states that a note in the manuscript's omission. It's missing one part. Now the Rebbe goes on now to Yesod, the level of Yesod. What is Yesod? We have now Yesod and Malchus. Yesod means foundation. Yesod talks about the connecting to, after you already made all the decisions in theory and in action, now it comes to the actual connecting, the actual giving. And the giving comes through connecting. When a person connects with a child, when you have a desire, a pleasure of giving to your child, when you give something with pleasure, you yourself are able to give better from within you. You have more what to give when you enjoy giving it, and also the child receives it much better. And he says, he's going to bring an example. When you're going to teach your child, you're going to sit face to face with the loving face the father wants to give him. And he's teaching the child is going to get so much better compared to if you, let's say you say the same thing, you say it for yourself. Let's say the father sits down and studies a page of Gemara, the Talmud for himself. And the child sits next to him and he hears the same thing, the same words. The child is not going to get it that much. And the father is not going to give so much because you're not connecting to the child. If you want to give something to the child, if you're connecting, you're doing it with love, and you enjoy it, the more enjoyment that you have because it's connecting with you yourself, the more you can give and the more the child will receive. And that is the attribute of Yesod. The category of Yesod, by way of example, the bond by which the father binds his intellect to the intellect of his son, while teaching him with love and willingness, for he wishes his son to understand. And without this bond, if you're just going to teach, the child is going to hear what you're teaching, that's not going to be the same. Without this bond, even if the son would hear the very same words from the mouth of the father, as he speaks and studies to himself, he would not understand them as well as now. Now that you connect to him, when his father binds his intellect to him and speaks with him face to face with love and desire, because he desires very much that his son understands. And the greater the desire is, the greater the influence in teaching. And the greater the desire and the light of the father, the greater the influence and the learning. Because then the son is able to absorb more and the father communicates more proportionally. Because through the desire and the light, and with a contented disposition, his own insight is heightened and amplified so that he can bestow enlightenment upon his son and teach him. And Alter Rebbe says that this is similar to the physical relationship between man and woman, that the more desire the person has in it, it brings more and a greater level of the סימן that comes from the father is in a greater level when there is more desire. This parallels to draw a metaphor from the attribute of Yesod in the sphere of truly physical, the profusion of spermatozoa that results from heightened desire and delight, and through which much is elicited from the brain, which is its source. This is why the Kabbalists, seeking to illustrate the imparting of knowledge out of a sense of pleasure, they use the analogy of a physical union, because there are a number of similarities between these two expressions of the attribute of Yesod, as will be explained. So this is the attribute, the way the person expresses himself outside of him. Now these attributes, says the Alter Rebbe, also they have the way they are within the person himself. The inner part of these attributes, chesed comes out of love, gevura comes out of fear. It says, "V'hine midas elu ein b'chinas ritzonius shebenefesh, u'b'seichem u'lebasham midas pnimius." Now these emotive attributes, those involved in imparting enlightenment and the like, are the external aspect of the soul. Within them are vested the inner attributes, which bring about the external attributes involved in the actual imparting of knowledge. What are the internal attributes? The internal aspects? Meaning the faculties of love, awe, and so on. This may be compared to the case of the father who bestows enlightenment upon his son. Why does he do it? Because of his love for his son. So the internal aspect of the attribute involved is love, and its external aspect is kindness. The love that he has for his son drives the kindness and the benevolence. On the other hand, when the father is trying to limit it, that comes from the inner attribute, the inner aspect of the attribute, which is fear. And withholds his influence because of his dread and fear, lest his son come to some downfall, heaven forfend. If it's going to be too much, it's going to lead to a downfall. Now goes the Alter Rebbe to the source of the emotive attributes. What is the source of the emotive attributes? So if you've been listening to the Tanya classes, you would know that the source is the intellect. When you understand a certain subject and you connect to it, you develop an emotive attribute towards it. The source and the root of these internal and external emotive attributes is the Chabad, an acronym for the intellectual faculties of Chochma, Bina, and Das of one's soul. Because a person's emotive traits are in proportion to his intellect. As we see, Kanire Bechush, this is empirically evident. שהקוטן שהחוכמה בנדע שלהם מבחינת קטנוס כל כך כל מידויסו ומדבורים קטני הערך. A child, for example, whose intellect, the Chabad, are in a state of pettiness, so all these emotive traits too relate to insignificant things. And as he matures in age and understanding, his emotive traits correspondingly aspire to worthier goals. And with adults too, the emotive traits develop in proportion to the intellect, for according to his intelligence is a man praised. Because the extent of his love and kindness correspond to the extent of his wisdom. And all his other internal and external traits likewise have their source in his Chabad. Most important to the development of the spiritual emotions is one's das, which derives from one's chachma and bina. What is the das? The das is the firm connecting to what you understand. When you have such a deep understanding, and when you concentrate in the chachma and bina, and you become connected to it, you become so certain by you that this leads to the emotive attributes. This is readily observed for the differences between the emotive traits of various people correspond to the differences in the respective degree of das. So this is very short, very briefly overviewing these 7 attributes. And tomorrow, the Alter Rebbe is going to continue to see how this relates to our godly soul. Thank you. Bezat Hashem, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.